You're just starting off a podcast or a conversation with like a thing that you're supposed to say specifically
Yeah.
is the hardest thing.
Yeah. I know. I feel like
So don't
pressure's on.
fuck it up.
Act like you've done this before.
Yeah. Act like you've been there before. All right. All right, welcome to the After Party Podcast. I'm your host, RJ. This is Rob, and we have our guest today, Nick, the co-founder of The Joe.
The Joe, yeah.
So, dude, I was like, okay, how are we going to
No, keep it Joe, yeah, man.
I was going to
Yeah.
say The Joe.
We're actually going to do a rebrand, so it doesn't even matter.
Is
at
it
some
Joe
point.
Coffee or just Joe? Or
It's just Joe, but like because here's the thing. Technically, there's a roaster in New York called Joe Coffee.
Yeah.
So there's some
Put that
confusion
slap
there.
on, yeah.
So we're rebranding, but the intention was always just to be Joe. But
Yeah.
then it's like we do it for the coffee industry.
Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
anyway, so everybody calls us Joe Coffee. The number of times I've been like, oh hey Joe, and it's like
Yeah.
I'm not Joe. That's the name of the brand. So you know what I mean?
You look like a Joe.
Yeah, like,
No.
yeah. I know I do. Honestly, dude.
That's what he says under their breath when they call him Joe.
Yeah,
Joe
they're
Mama.
just like Joe, generic white guy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like
yeah.
Chad. Hey Chad.
Chad, yeah. I get that a lot,
You got
right?
one of those faces. I get it.
yeah,
It's fine.
yeah. No, so I don't know if you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your background.
Yeah. Co-founder Joe, brother to Brendan, who is my co-founder,
Yeah,
and
and
we
you guys
started
will
Joe-
recognize him. He's one of the partners there at the podcast.
There you
Yeah.
go. Yeah. Like probably the last episode 2 years ago.
Yeah,
No
yeah,
big
2
deal.
years. Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while. Okay, we've been gone.
Minute, yeah.
It's fine. No, but yeah. So yeah, about me. We started Joe back in because we're gonna talk about entrepreneurship, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, we got funded back initially in mid 2018. Launched our first product back in January 2019. Had a crazy kind of roller coaster through the pandemic. Had a lot of really cool experiences, in those that that period of time. What we were doing as a business model became in the way that AI right now is like the hot thing that everybody's going after.
Mhm.
Food tech and the idea of like contactless ordering
Yep.
came on, was on everybody's radar. So there's a lot to say about that, but I think that the coolest things was just the folks that I was able to meet and
Yeah.
pitch, and folks that I never thought that I would be in a room with
Yeah.
or have the time of day. So so anyway, I don't want to name drop.
I was gonna say,
we
you
could
not
talk
gonna
about
name
those
drop? You
things.
want to
Yeah.
name drop real quick?
Yeah, so I'm like forgetting the names right now, but some of the cool ones was I pitched the GM of the Pelicans, and what is his name? Damn it! He played for Duke. He anyway, I can't remember. He was former basketball player.
Mm.
I can't remember who he is, dude.
Is that Ferry?
No. Black dude was a hooper, really cool guy. He was a GM. You Google this shit. No.
Do your own work. Google
Yeah,
it.
you know, right.
But founder of Warby Parker, founder of
Oh, okay.
Allbirds, founder of StubHub, some of the founders of PayPal,
Oh wow.
the Uber Eats syndicate or the Uber syndicate, like the folks that run that. So some of the like leaders in just if you're in the startup ecosystem, the folks that are doing a lot of influential content in product and engineering, kind of leading a lot of the conversations around what's coming next, was able to meet those guys. And I think what was super cool about it, honestly, the most affirming part of that is I think that there's a part of everybody that's like culture really celebrates all these personalities, and we think about them as like the naturals or folks that are particularly talented or adept, and honestly it's not. It's like it's like us, you know what I mean? Just from either different conditions that they had, different opportunities. I think I learned a lot about just how important network is in opportunities and getting into those spaces, and then also how anybody can earn their way into those, like through just work and scrapping and grit. Like anybody in whatever circle respects the grind, and just folks that are relentless. So even if you're, so anyway, so those are some of the big lessons I had. Is even if you're persistent and you have a deep sense of purpose on it, even if things aren't perfect or not dialing up, like you'll get time. Like people will give you time, and do want to create opportunities. So the breakthrough for us was really around the networking piece. So Brendan met our first advisor, this guy Steven, and I'm not even gonna try to say his last name because I'm not even sure how to say it, because I always mess it up.
Out of respect.
I always just remember the ways that I messed it up, so I don't even know it, so I'm not even gonna try. But then, that's kind of that was key to start getting the introductions just to folks that were investors in Seattle. And then the angel investors, oftentimes they're LPs, or they basically invest in the venture capital firms, right? So the VC firms, they, when you're pitching them as a business, it's like, oh, they got the money, but they got to go do the same exact thing to all the folks that actually are writing the checks to put money in the funds. And so those angels are typically the entry point to get into the VCs. So we got an introduction to a VC, pitch that team, and they're the ones that were like, okay, like there's something here. And then we got a first, it was really a pre-seed round. I think we called it a seed at the time, but it was pre-seed for $1 million to just get the idea off the ground.
So that was from 2015 to when was that? Like,
man, we were bootstrapping from just slow progress from 2015 to 2018.
And then when you when you said you guys like fully went for it, that was 2018. You were saying
that was 2018 where we signed up for Coffee Fest, like an industry event.
Yeah, like, Tennessee, right?
It was in LA.
Sorry,
we're like, okay, we're buying, like we're spending $3,000 out of our own pocket, and this was after we quit our corporate jobs. I was making half as much money as I was when I was doing corporate, doing this with twins now, with all that, and it was just like, it was a burn the boats moment. We're like, we're gonna get this money, like hell or high water. And we ended up, that check got wired when we were on the trade show floor at Coffee Fest. We got the first $1 million at the event.
How'd that feel?
That was dope, man. That felt really good. That felt really good. Yeah, we
especially the location where it went, like where it went
down. It was LA. And here's the thing too, like $1 million sounds like so much money, right? I don't think I ever even like did the math of like how much are we all making and how long is this gonna last.
You're just thinking of
really, like we did it. Like there's no stopping us now, because dude, for years, we were just like grinding, being like, dude, if we just had some resources, like we would blow it up. You know what I mean? And so and then there was all types of crazy stuff, but yeah, that felt great. There's so much. It's such a dense journey. It's such a dense journey. So you guys tell me where you would want to take it, or what you think would be interesting.
So I think that's one of the reasons I wanted you on today, to really talk about that, and just from your perspective. I think a lot of people out there, especially watching this, whatever, are thinking about, kind of like, like your like your business, like where you were at before you started that, right? I think there's many people that are in that. They were like kind of where you were at, and they're like, okay, he went from there to there. Like, how did that happen, kind of thing, right? And then and them trying to figure out how could they make it happen, or realize it is something they could do. Like you said, right? We look at some of these names and we're thinking like, kind of starstruck a little bit, right? Or like how you think they're going to be, right? But then you're like, no, they're, it's kind of, they respect the hustle. It wasn't like that, right? And then kind of how you attack that. So I guess, maybe starting out, I don't know if you want to talk about the journey of even like just starting the startup, maybe in the first phase, is that how that went for you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm a big believer actually in the moments when you're suffering the most is usually, that's when gateways open up for you. It's in my opinion, it's your soul, it's your authentic self being like, hey, this ain't why you're here. You know what I mean? And so it gives you the opportunity when things get really tough to be able to let go of all the bullshit and all the stories that you tell yourself about who you are and what role you're supposed to be playing. So I actually had I was working at, well, the story, I was working at Zillow before I did the startup thing, but the journey really started at Microsoft because I started getting hit with just like crippling bouts of anxiety. Like I got diagnosed with what was it called? Is like a panic disorder essentially, and got like prescribed these medicines that just made me tired and all these things, and it got to a point where I couldn't like have a one-to-one conversation without like going into a panic attack. And so this was at the time when Vanessa was pregnant with twins, and I was like, oh my God, like I don't know if I can't talk to people, how am I gonna provide for my family? Like all that pressure just started compounding, and then the idea of that, so I would be in a business meeting, and I would all of a sudden I would get so panicked, I would be disoriented. I couldn't even like read the time on the clock and stuff. I had to like leave the room. Anyway, there's all types of things that go into that. So for me, I was like, okay, um, I ended up going to Zillow because I thought, well, maybe it's just the Microsoft thing, and it's just that grind and the culture.
That culture, right?
It was pre-Satya. It was the Palmer. It was
Palmer.
they would calibrate based on like you stack rank against each other and all this stuff. It was it was like super toxic. Um, so I went to Zillow where it had a really good culture and everything, and for a while it worked, but then ultimately after some time it kind of came back. So then that was my thing. I was like, okay, maybe just the rigid structure. I just need to do the startup thing. And what I was super surprised about was, and I remember hearing this when I was working corporate for a long time, wanting to get into startup, that it's actually harder to get into the startup space from a corporate role. And I was like, why is that? Like, you have all this experience, you have all this stuff. And I understand now.
You bring some of the habits there over here. You shouldn't.
It's just like, it's a different skill set. You know what I mean? It's a different, and it's not that you can't, it's not that, like there's like tons of folks in corporate that can, but the things that you really need to do is be like flexible and be able to work with like a ton of ambiguity and to be entrepreneurial. So like when we hire folks from corporate side, they need to have some evidence of like entrepreneurialism and doing, or creator or things like that, which there's a lot of folks that are in corporate that don't do anything like that. It's and it's not one's better than the other. It's just some people really thrive in that, like, okay, and it's like managing optics and it's doing those. That's just a different kind of talent. But so I was, my thought was, okay, I just need to, maybe if I get into an environment with less structure, maybe startup would be really good for me. So initially for me, I was trying to just get a job at a startup, and I couldn't get hired at a startup. So I ended up, I quit Zillow, and Brendan and I, meanwhile, were like, hey, let's start doing our own startup. What would that idea be? And in like 2015, we came up with the idea of Joe. And then we were just moonlighting, like on the weekends and the evenings, just anytime we had, we were trying to figure it out. We went through, I think, like 17 contract developers trying to build that thing out. Ultimately, Brendan took when his son Masick was born, he used that time period to also do a coding boot camp to learn how to just like get the prototype off the ground. And I took a job doing like startup consulting, actually doing marketing for startups, just to kind of get in that space. And then at some point we we did that for like 2 years, and it's just, dude, when every time it's just, you're always thinking, anytime there's a spare moment, I should be working on Joe. That was just like the thought that was always in the back of the mind, just trying to, you're just, you're tired, you're trying to just push it an inch, and I would say that's a piece of advice I would give, is the best thing that we did back then was we never fully stopped. Like, it's just, you can just, if you can take
here,
an inch
there, exactly.
So so anyway, so then ultimately at some point we were like, hey, we either got to like go for this all the way, or we got to just stop, because this is going to like bleed us to death, And so so that's, I think, actually when I quit Zillow, took those startup jobs, and we started just spending all the time working with coffee shop owners. And I probably say, like, we started out as this hypothesis of, if we can make local business independence as convenient as corporate giants, more people will buy local. It'll be a cool consumer experience, And it's evolved and changed a bunch since then. But where was I going with that? What was I just talking about?
You're talking about just kind of your experience getting into the startup, kind of
Oh,
from
yeah.
where you came from, your background, which I think you kind of
Yeah.
did right now perfectly.
Yeah,
kind of
so
put that part of it.
yeah. So then, so anyway, so then ultimately we sort of said, okay, I'm going to go out and we're going to try to raise some funding. And
Yep.
then the question was like, how do you get into
Yeah.
conversations
Yep.
with who that is, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and like, how do you get a meeting with the
Yeah.
VC and that kind of a thing. And the biggest learning that I think we had there was, you know, I remember going to, it's like such a network thing
Yeah.
because it's like you have angel investors or you do venture.
Yeah.
And I didn't know the found like what makes a company a venture
Venture.
scale company
Versus,
versus like just an angel
Yeah.
or a small business thing. And so that was a bunch of learnings that we had, and I can talk to that.
I was gonna say if you can maybe want to give a little
Yeah.
definition on that right now, that'd be
Yeah. So the way that if you're looking to do like a venture scale company, the definition of that is that you need to be able to make a business case that it can be $100 million revenue type company. And there's like some things that are happening now in VC that are changing where the bar is even raising higher. And it's like there's this weird stuff around like Anderson Horowitz is now raising like $1 billion fund, and the way that the math works on VCs, it's just like creating this crazy stuff. AI is it's just like everything's wild right now. But that's been sort of like the industry standard of if can you make this business $100 million business? Can you show a reasonable business model to do it? And venture capital is supposed to be like the instrument that you use to take those moonshots and especially in like 2020, 2021, 2019, the markets were frothy, which is like it's okay if you just freaking light a dumpster of cash on fire if you just hit these top line things. And so that was kind of the idea around what venture is. We didn't start having venture capital conversations initially. We started going the angel route and being like, hey, can we get like a couple $100,000 just to kind of build this tech and prove a concept. So typically you know, they have these stages for venture, which is like you got pre-seed, which it can be like pre-product. It's just an idea. And it's like, here's our team, here's our idea, give us some money so we can do this. Seed is like, you have like a prototype or something, maybe it's pre-revenue. And then you go to like Series A where it's like you've proven all these principles and now it's starting to, then they're just growth stages and it's like hitting these tranches and then you scale up. And the idea is to get to IPO.
IPO.
So anyway, so that's kind of.
So your first one, you guys angel investors. You went that way first.
We tried. We talked to a bunch of angels.
Where were you at the phase with your product when you started going into this? Like
we had we had built sort of what is really like a prototype. We didn't have any revenue coming through it. You know what I mean? We had
like the app.
We had we had the app. We had like 3 coffee shops on it. Essentially, we had a couple. We had the shops. Marketing it to some of their customers, and we're like, hey, people will actually do this. You know what I mean? And there's a whole bunch of story on like what got us to that point. But at that point, we just had a thing that was shitty and didn't work. Like at that point, it didn't even, I think that the barista or the owner would get like a text message when an order came in, and you could only order like 1 drink at a time and stuff like that. And then our asses went out and got King 5 News to do a story on our app. We had like 2 coffee shops in Seattle. And anyway, but it was, it was getting signal. It was where it's like, hey, there's an appetite for people to use this. There's an appetite for coffee shops to do it. So, it's always being, I think in the startup space, it's always being, you have to always be uncomfortable, because if you're not like a little bit uncomfortable, you're just not going fast enough.
So when you do go to like the angel investors and all the investors, like, do you feel like, 'cause you have a marketing background, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that helped you a lot since you're saying you like what you had wasn't exactly what you wanted to show probably, but it was something you could sell though?
Yeah, I think, and I had,
vision,
right? And in my experience that I had agency experience. I had experience pitching ideas internally, making a business case. And so some of that helped, but I didn't have any, we learned all the lessons the hard way around how we should have been thinking about it and how to enter those conversations. But, we couldn't get angels. We couldn't get any angels to do it.
So you had that prototype, you went to the angel investors, it didn't happen. What happened? What was the next step then from there? How did you guys proceed?
Well, actually, so there's a couple things
Yeah.
on that. I remember a lot of folks would be like, "Hey, you should just do like a friends and family round."
Mm.
I was like, "Friends and family, like a family, like we're the first in our family to go to college. Like we don't have people that are writing, it's like, oh, raise a few $100,000 from family." And we're like, "Dude, what the hell is he talking to right now?" And anyway, so then I don't even remember how. Oh, so you know what it was? So the breakthrough for us was really around the networking piece. So Brendan met our first advisor, this guy Steven, and I'm not even gonna try to say his last name because I'm not even sure how to say it because I always mess it up.
Out of respect.
I always just remember the ways that I messed it up, so I don't even know. So I'm not even gonna try. But then, that's kind of that was key to start getting the introductions just to folks that were investors in Seattle.
Yeah.
And then the angel investors, oftentimes they're LPs or they basically invest in the venture capital firms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the VC firms, they, when you're pitching them as a business, it's like, oh, they got the money, but they got to go do the same exact thing to all the folks that actually are writing the checks to put money in the funds.
Yeah.
And so those angels are typically the entry point to get into the VCs. So we got an introduction to a VC, pitch that team, and they were the ones that were like, okay, like there's something here. And then we got a first. It was really a pre-seed round. I think we called it a seed at the time, but it was pre-seed for $1 million to just get the idea off the ground.
So that was from 2015 to when was that? Like,
man, yeah, we were bootstrapping from just slow progress from 2015 to 2018.
And then when you when you said you guys like fully went for it, that was 2018. You were saying
that was 2018 where we signed up for Coffee Fest, like an industry event.
Yeah,
we're like,
Tennessee, right?
It was in LA.
Sorry,
and we're like, okay, we're buying, like we're spending $3,000 out of our own pocket, and this was after we quit our corporate jobs. I was making half as much money as I was when I was doing corporate, doing this with twins now, with all that, and it was just like, it was a burn the boats moment. We're like, we're gonna get this money, like hell or high water. And we ended up, that check got wired when we were on the trade show floor at Coffee Fest. We got the first $1 million at the event.
How'd that feel?
That was dope, man. That felt really good. That felt really good. Yeah, we
especially the location where it went, like where it went.
It was LA. And here's the thing too, like $1 million sounds like so much money, right? I don't think I ever even like did the math of like how much are we all making? And
you're just thinking of
like we did it. Like there's no stopping us now because dude, for years, we were just like grinding, being like, dude, if we just had some resources, like we would blow it up. You know what I mean? And so and then there was all types of crazy stuff, but yeah, that felt great. There's so much. It's such a dense journey. It's such a dense journey. So you guys tell me where you would want to take it or what you think would be interesting.
For me, and I'm pretty sure people are interested in, is just kind of how your prep is for these pitches, right? Like, what do you need to put together? How do you put the business case together? What are some of the learnings, I guess, you got from doing that? What works best, what doesn't?
Honestly, biggest learning, and this is what I'm bad at, like this is a big knock against me as a founder, is my point of view on what VC is like, this is the instrument where you take moonshots, where it's you get into the space to try to transform an industry, to be disruptive, to just change the way things are done, change a paradigm. And that might take a lot of money, but it's like worth it on the other side. So my assumption was that the investors that you're talking to are like, that's why they're in it. You know what I mean? And there was actually, I can't remember what year it was, but because those are like kind of the lore of what VC is. But there was like a certain moment in time where it became legal for institutions like governments and cities and stuff like that to invest in these venture funds. And I think that was a catalyst for turning the VC industry to like a real like a commoditized thing, to where it's really just it's a risk asset in a portfolio. And so the outcome of that is that a lot of how you should enter these conversations is so much of how businesses are looked at is very formulaic. And so it's not so much about being like, hey, I need you to see my idea. it really is. There's like spreadsheets where they like
so
put in the variables,
yeah.
right? And you got to understand that like the person that you're pitching has to go pitch their partners and get consensus.
Yeah.
So if there's any little, you know, it's like their social capital that they're putting on the line to say, hey, I think we should invest in these guys. And you can't really you can't let them, you don't, you know, you gotta empower them with the story and the bulletproof thing.
Exactly.
So then there's a ton of pressure to look a certain way to have your, you know, so I think if you're trying to get in those rooms and you want a successful pitch, like look at Y Combinator, look at the best practices on here's what the pitch deck should be. Here's like, you know, here's the KPIs in terms of like what growth is. And at each stage, there's different definitions of what you need to prove. And so recently, actually, I've gotten like another layer of insight on this stuff because I got asked to be a scout for a VC.
Oh,
actually,
nice.
which was cool. But then there's all this stuff that VCs don't tell you, they don't signal because it's like they are paying attention to how fast does the founder respond to an email, because that tells us something about. And I'm notoriously slow on that stuff. I'm like, oh, hey, my bad, I've been busy. Like, you know, so there's, you know, I would say there's a lot of pressure to assimilate to what it is. And I think if you're just looking, if your intention or your goal is just to get that check, then it is, then go that route. You know, I think there's some people that are cut out for that. But for me, that anxiety stuff came right back, because if you're living and you're not being true to yourself and like your why at your heart, you're not gonna perform as well. Like you need to be able to have the courage of being like, you know, I want this thing to exist because it needs to. And so on one hand, I would say it's like tactics, you know, like tactically it's good to have the polish and all that stuff. But you have to have something deeper behind it, or else it's hollow and you're just gonna crumble under the pressure.
Did you guys ever have a point to where you guys are presenting the product or demoing it, and as you're demoing it, the product, like, you know, the live demo freezes or the app doesn't work the way it functions? And if it did, how do you maneuver around that?
You know what's funny? You know what's funny actually with the investor side, early on, I don't even know if we ever demoed it. They might have tried it before the meeting. But at that phase, the pre-seed, it's more so like they're looking at you as, can this team do it? Does the idea does the TAM, the total addressable market, is it big enough that it's VC scale? And at that point, like it was a lot lower bar than it is today, because there was so much money in the markets, and it was they have to write checks, like they got to get this money out, you know. So, but for prospects and customers, that happened a lot.
So we'll fix that.
We're working on that right now.
So there's a lot of okay, you know. But like I said, we went through 17 contract engineers before we got our tech co-founder. So
So how did you go about finding like that somebody to help really the engineer, like that part of it?
That was another relationship through Brennan. The teacher that Brennan had at his coding boot camp, we recruited him to be our tech co-founder.
Oh, nice.
So we initially paid him out of pocket during that period where we were, you know, when we went to raise. So once we got that piece, in our mind it was like, okay, our understanding was we need to demonstrate that you can get a tech co-founder to come on board and build. And that's changed a little bit. Like if I was to start a business again, I would say I would go to, especially for the prototype, especially for the like, hey, we're just doing a proof of concept of this. I would have gone, you know, now it'd be like hire an offshore dev team. I think with AI and stuff, you can do, you know, you can even do things just with like smart sheet. You just need to demonstrate signal, like, or even folks will do, you can do ads and be like, hey, this idea that isn't real, it's all vaporware, got this many leads. So you just have to demonstrate.
That's like that. I think at that point, there's that. I think we've all seen the ad on YouTube, whatever, that one game. Like you know, you're shooting and there's like a gun here, or people are coming here and you're shooting the people.
Oh yeah,
and then you can shoot this thing and get another gun or kill 5 more people. I guess that they're saying. I think that was like like you said, an ad. It wasn't a real game.
And I be downloading all those games all the time, and I'm like, this is nothing like what I just.
I'm gonna play Gardening Escapes, and they're not even the game. Like,
exactly. So I think that goes back to it, because it's also when people trying to download it or look for it. Like, let's make it.
100%. Yeah, totally. It's like at that pre-seed, it's is there an appetite for this, and how can you prove that? And you can get creative in how you prove it. You just need to convince them.
That's a good point.
And then in the VC thing, what's wild though is it's like such a bubble, because whatever the hot topic of the day is, then that's where the interest is. So then you see all these concepts, which I think is I think that's a counterproductive part of the VC industry, right? And just like whether it's public markets or private markets, the idea of just speculative bubbles being built and people like this herd mentality after chasing that thing.
Yeah.
Because then it creates this behavior of like, people aren't building things for sustainable value or what needs to exist in the world.
Yeah.
You're just trying to go get like a cash grab, you know, and you're not creating value.
Yep.
Because if something can happen and a bubble can burst, that means that all that money was just bullshit. You know what I mean? There was no value created. It was just money, fake money being thrown, numbers and bank accounts that aren't real.
Yeah.
No, some good points there that have me thinking about stuff. As well.
Man,
so that's that.
I think ultimately it comes down to is like, if you have an idea and you really feel like this is something that can take off, just go for it. Same thing with the podcast. Raj had an idea of like, hey, I want to get a guy together to talk about X, Y, and Z, and we said, fuck it, let's do it. Got all the equipment they wanted, started posting, and I think that's one of the biggest things about like YouTube and podcasts is like, the only person that's going to stop you from being successful is yourself, because you at least got to try. It's going to be a grind for sure. Like say it took you 4 or 5 plus years to like go from concept to idea to selling to actually having a product out. And
but like you were saying, you have to have a passion behind it, right?
Exactly.
If you're just trying to YouTube for the podcasting, it's not for you, because it's taking a long time to get money like that.
Oh,
If you actually want a podcast just to get your stuff out there, have conversation like we want to do, like you're saying, it's kind of like the why behind it, right?
If I did it all again, are you guys familiar with Rick Rubin? You guys know Rick Rubin, right?
Yeah.
So he has have you heard his podcast or seen his stuff?
Yeah.
Because his position is, and this is, if I did it all over again, like my actual advice now, right? You're asking, how do you get it? How do you get the meeting? How do you optimize for getting a check? Those are the things to do. But I think if you want to have like a fulfilling life, which is more important than all those things, is, he talks about if you treat, like I'm a big believer now in treating business as an art. I think that everything, like this is an art, right? Like there are constraints to this medium that make what is produced and what we create all the more beautiful because of the constraints of it, which is cool. I think the same thing is true in business or music. And so I would say that thing that you're passionate about, if you align to, I think if you're passionate about making a bunch of money and getting notoriety, that crumbles because that's going to get tested and challenged. And like I know 100% if Brendan wasn't a co-founder, I would have hung it up so many times along the way, because it gets so hard. I'm talking I mean, I've been yelled at by investors. I've been, running out of money in the bank account. We're not going to make payroll. We have to go raise 500K in like 3 days. And it's just like, it gets there right in time. Just crazy stuff. Like the craziest stories happen. And so, but if you're treating it as, one is, I think you make way better decisions. And you're, when you're in alignment with something big, like I'm a very big believer of like, there's something bigger than ourselves. And if you just bring yourself into alignment with that, things start flowing. And when you're not, that's when like you feel it, dude. Like it's like, okay, your ego's here. You're doing this for the wrong reasons. You're out of alignment on it. So Rick Rubin talks about like, do it for the art, do it for the expression of it.
And that's a great point too, because not only are you building this for, you and your brother, but you have to deal with the families that are, working under your team and make sure they get paid and stuff. If they don't get paid, you're losing a lot of hours in development work and sales and stuff. So you have to you have to make sure that the people under you on your team.
Because you're going from a place where because you're going from a place, like you said, Microsoft or one of these tech companies where you're just getting the check, you just think, but now you're the guy where like, we need to sign the check.
And you know how it feels to like work for a company where the atmosphere isn't great. The money may be good, but the people that you work for isn't great. They're cutthroat. They don't understand that's things that you're trying to
that's a good point
to them.
I think that's a good point you're hitting on, because that's probably underrated, but interesting to think about is like your startup. How did you guys build your culture, or how did you model after, or What lessons did you learn from that? Because I know you like Rob just mentioned, like the culture, like these different companies, and what you wanted to bring. How did you guys kind of start it up that way?
Okay, so here's the thing. In football, like Seahawks will have this thing around like, what's the identity of this team, right?
Yeah.
That 100% happens in the startup world. And when you were talking, what you said, Rob, I wrote down conviction, because when you're doing things for hollow reasons, what happens is when things get scary, when you start being like, dang, is this the right decision? Am I making the right decision right now? And you're thinking about trying to control for outcomes. Like you're trying to be like, okay, well, we want the business to be here. So is this, and your mind's going like, okay, like, well, this contingency plan, and you're just like, if I just think this hard enough and I just solve this the right way and mitigate, all those things. What happens is in those scary moments, you waver and you change and you shift and you tell your team to do this thing, and then they see it when you like don't believe, and you have to, in the moments where nobody know, like there's so much ambiguity and people are looking to you to be like, what are we gonna do? And you want to be like, I don't fucking know. You tell me, shit, I'm scared too, guys.
I'm with you guys right now.
I'm in my late 30s, 40s.
So if that's all unfolding and expressing from a place of something that doesn't resonate so deep in your core, something that you don't feel so strongly about, you're gonna be bouncing all over the place. You know what I mean? It's like you have that lack of identity, and I would say that there was a lot of time where there's culture can be defined by like a lack thereof. There's like a vacuum, and there was times when there was a leadership vacuum for myself in particular, because I wasn't aligned. I wasn't sure why, like what was the thing that I really wanted to express. You know what I mean? Like what was like a real deep purpose that went beyond just being successful with the startup. We kind of had the like, hey, we want to help small business, but it wasn't like, it's got to be, in my experience or my belief, so in your bones. And then the other thing I think that was the big, like aha, or the like, holy shit, how the tables turn. How everybody talks shit about the boss at companies. It's like leadership doesn't know what the fuck they're doing, dude. Like if they would just do this and you just do this. And then you're on the other side of that and you're like, oh my God, I know that we look so incompetent right now, but people don't realize there's like so many constraints and variables that you have to work within. So it's like the things that feel so obvious is like, okay, but that doesn't happen out of nothing. So it's like, if we do this, we have to not do this. And if we don't do,
they don't see the constraints, right?
That
you see.
There's so many constraints. There's so many, there's a video of Steve Jobs. If you go to YouTube and you write Steve Jobs and polished rocks, he has this talk where he talks about like, building products is holding 5,000 things in your mind at one time. And then it's having conversations and pushing and arguments and all this stuff. And that's the rocks being polished into something that on the other side of that, if you have really great process and team and culture, create something special. That is those 5,000 different variables of like, whether it's customers or employees or your team members are like, we should just do this. It's like, okay, for example, in 2020, when is like pandemic hit, all this stuff. And it's like, we're a 15-person team and is, hey, we need to be doing DEI initiatives and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, but like also like we're burning $150,000 a month and we're going to die in 4 months if we don't get our shit together. So like we, there's pressing things. I want to do those things, and we did, but at the same time, it's like, there's just so many constraints you're not thinking of unless you're in that seat.
Yeah, and I remember Brendan mentioning to us one time, you're doing a podcast, like, yeah, man, in order to keep the lights on and make sure our developers, are making payrolls, like I'm gonna take a pay cut or not have my own paycheck.
I'm taking
like,
paychecks.
That's dedication, because like I said, you got a family, you both have families, you have bills you got to pay, you got responsibilities, you're taking time out of your day, and that takes a lot for an owner or co-founders of the company to make that decision just to make sure the employees can continue working.
100%, man. Like when we, it's crazy you say that, because when we were running out of money, we were like, we thought we were gonna have to shut down Joe. I maxed out on my credit cards, all that stuff.
That's business. Like people don't realize all those constraints and sacrifices you make, man. You dedicate your own money to it.
Yeah. I mean, this is like a whole nother thing. We don't have to go this direction, but we were about to shut that down. And then this is when we were building Joe based on, like I was saying before, what did the investors want us to be? What do we need to look like to be an investable company? And then our dad passed away right as we were running out of money. And he believed in the idea, and and we ended up taking the insurance money from his passing to put into the business and turned it around. We went from going to be out of we were going to go out of business to changing all of our ideology around like what we built, how we built. And Brendan and I just spent like a couple weeks being like, okay, if we're going to do this, like if we're going to go down, let's go down trying to do what we wanted to unapologetically without compromise. What would we build? Turn that around, started growing the business 100% year over year, multiple years, completely turned that around. So that's why I have so much conviction around like all the startup headlines and everything is about how much people raise, and it's about the like the hot technology that time. Build something that has value, build something you really believe in, and whether or not that's recognized by investors or whatever, like you will have a much better life if you're doing that and doing it from a place of like art and expression rather than chasing the bag. I would say.
Exactly.
Yeah, but then you're not doing it for yourself. Now you're just doing it for the chase of the money.
100%. And it's not even, honestly too, it's like I feel like alignment is, if you're just doing it for yourself, you're gonna suffer. If you're doing it for what's gonna make the world a better place, what is the like we out of this? Build for the we, and you're in the flow, I think.
Now, there's a couple of things I want to touch though before we move on. We have other topics we want to talk about today, but just on this is that one thing is when you're pitching to investor stuff, like how like people watch like Shark Tank. How's that? Does it feel anything similar to that? Is it?
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's very similar to that because you go through and you bare your soul and it's like this thing that you really believe in, and then they try to poke holes in every single thing. They challenge you on it. They challenge you on the numbers. If you don't know your numbers cold, it's like you need to know this. And I mean, it's I mean, think about this, man. I was dealing with anxiety and stuff.
That's what I wanted to ask. Like, I wanted to ask, like, did you ever have any anxiety? How did you do with your anxiety?
I had a panic attack on the pitch for the investor that invested in us. I had a panic attack during the first one, and I had to like take a breath. Brendan kind of filled in, and I just kind of gathered myself. But the thing is, the way that I got over that panic disorder was I felt like I have to do something that I believe in enough that's going to push me through it. Like that's the only way I'm going to be able to get through it. You kind of just have to face that shit in the eye and just walk through it, you know? And so I had a panic attack, but then I just got back on the horse and kept going. And then that was my attitude towards it. It's like, you know what? I guess I'm just gonna have panic attacks now and fuck it. Like I'm just gonna have a panic attack and I'll pick myself up. And if you got a problem with that, like, I don't give a shit. This is who I am. So
no, that's cool to hear that how you were dealing with it. You're like fuck it. This is what it is. Rip the band-aid off, right?
You don't have a choice, man.
Exactly.
You only go in one direction.
Exactly. No, but next thing I want to hit on with you is just kind of, so you kind of have an interesting perspective on this because you were kind of in that space with the first Trump admin, and then you went to the Biden one. Now you're going to the new Trump one coming up. How did you? I guess maybe I don't know. I don't think it's fair to compare the comparisons just because of COVID and the different times we were. But like, what are you seeing probably from like previous years that you're seeing maybe more opportunity coming up that you see in your guys's like area, and also just in startups in general, kind of like startup.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that there's a perception that interest rates will likely get, I mean, I think it was starting to head that way anyway, but, when it comes to small business and entrepreneurship, I think that this is where establishment Democrats are like, there is more bureaucracy and not enough freedom on things that can turn off the startup community. And there's and so I think in that sense of like freeing up constraints to some extent from a sense of, okay, will we be able to access loans cheaper? Will we be able to do things like that? There's a perception that, okay, maybe there's going to be some things that will allow us to move a little more freely. I think that the question is, what is that at the expense of? And there's the question of when there's not the right intention and there's not there has to be some guardrails. I think this is the thing that like both sides don't do well is the big corporations get all these breaks. They have all these advantages. They don't pay taxes, you know, so there's not from either side nourishment in the idea of like what actual free markets are, right? Like conservative politics is supposed to be around, we believe in free markets. We believe in all these things, which are the principles, but like those principles, politics on both sides, they divide it down the middle. So it's, we believe in free markets, but we don't believe in free labor markets. We believe in free markets, but we don't believe in, you know, or freedom from, but we don't believe in, you know, women's choice to, you know, things like that. So in a business sense, there's, when the constraints are lifted, it is the bigger corporations that are able to throw their weight around. It is it's the folks that are the haves instead of the have-nots. Whereas I think the establishment Democrats, in at least what is ostensibly an intention to make it more fair, they are too restrictive, in my opinion, on small businesses. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like,
I know what you're
if you free things up and it's like, okay, there's a bully in a room with all the tools, and it's like, hey, things are free. Everybody has an equal opportunity here. It's like, hey, homeboy has all the resources over there. Is this really free? And on the other side, it's like, hey, we're all handcuffed. So now go do this thing. And so it's kind of, you know, it's a little bit damned if you do, damned if you don't. For us, we worked really hard to get cash flow positive. So the one thing that I'm looking at, I was expecting this with if Kamala would have won anyway, or Trump, was around reducing interest rates. I think that there's probably going to be more restraints and more access to that capital, which shifts. But you know, I don't know. I will also go on the record on saying I wish Kamala would have won. But you know.
Did you guys, you know, during the whole COVID, you heard of bigger companies be able to take advantage of PPE loans and, you know, Bank of America getting billions and billions of dollars, whereas smaller companies, they don't have that same amount of, you know, influence to get, you know, some of those things. Did you guys run into any of those issues?
You know, we got some PPE money. We got a little bit of PPE money, and then and I remember when we first got it, I was like, "Oh, cool! Like it's like a grant." It's like, no, we had to pay that shit back. No, we had to pay that back.
You guys aren't scamming or anything like that.
Because I mean, for us, we like I was saying, we cut all of our profits all the way down. So while there was more sales that went through our system, we burned so much money to keep coffee shops going, and so that they could serve their customers. So that was essentially the foundation of how we did it. But yeah, we had to pay that stuff back.
And when they want their money, they want their money. You know? No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Wow. So how did I guess it comes back to, I was gonna ask about, like, especially for the industry you guys are in, how did that happen with COVID? Like, how did you guys deal with that? What kind of things you learned?
Oh my God, dude. Okay, that was a really. Let me try to like do that in a short thing. So initially,
4 years ago. 5.
There was thousands of decisions. Like it was such a dense time for real.
Because the way I'm looking at it is that, like, at that point, contactless is like the way to go. So that's kind of big boom for you.
You have to,
But at the same time, money started to, and money was still going at that point, but the interest rates were starting to go up, and probably a little harder world you were going through at that time.
So it was weird because when things started shutting down, we all of a sudden had hundreds of coffee shops that started signing up for a service. So we had to reorg overnight. We went from being, hey, we're going to build, you know, we're going to bring on hundreds of shops in Seattle, to, hey, we got to, like, these businesses are going to go under unless we, you know, roll out this service. But at this point, Square, the most popular point of sale, didn't have like an online ordering service. They ended up acquiring one during that time. Toast didn't exist. And so so it felt like, oh wow, we had this like huge kind of tailwind, but at the same time we had one competitor in the space, and it was a race to the bottom. So we ended up essentially you know, it was like, okay, they brought their rates to here, and they would be signing up shops, and it was online where you know, people were having debates, Joe, or it was Clusive at the time. And so we, you know, weren't making any money. We're just burning this cash. And the whole idea was, you know, frothy markets. It's we can demonstrate, we can get the traction, and it was just like a dogfight, you know, us against each other. signing up shops, but not making any profit out of it, not extending runway, and having to hire up to be able to do that. And there's a whole bunch of crazy stories in here, but I will say that like we were in this weird place where we were launching a bunch of shops and growing really fast. But then when we were going to investors to be like, hey, you know, we justify a Series A here, but they're like, yeah, but it's COVID. Like, what's this going to look like when COVID isn't here? And so we grew, and then it's like, yeah, but COVID. And then and then once markets opened back up, we saw this dip. There was like a 30% dip. And we had been grinding like, oh my, we hired you know, VCs were like, hey, well, you need to demonstrate that as a leadership team, you can recruit top talent. So we recruited the head of Lyft for the Southeast region that scaled this team from 0 to 200 people and got him to come on board and paid him a big paycheck and hired all I think we got up to like 30 something employees at this time. And then when things opened back up, it was, you know, we saw this dip and we had been grinding so hard, and we learned during that time, one, the market landscape totally changed. All these new entrants came in. There were so many substitutes of the service. And then there's all these other factors that we realized that like this type of business model is going to be really hard to grow this way. We need to have sort of a complete operating system and basically evolve into what we are now. And so that was when we had to lay off a ton of folks. We laid off the sales team. We had to go all in on product and do that. So then, you know, and then it was like, okay, COVID's over and you're growing, but you're not growing hundreds of percent. And, you know, and then it's like, but how do you grow 200, 300% year over year when you have this superficial tailwind that you said we can't invest because it's just COVID. But then it's not like,
we got it back up. Now you want it way
out there? Like, we're gonna do it with nobody. You know, it's just. So anyway, so that ended up being, you know, kind of turning us into. It made us really strong, honestly. Like the way that we make decisions on product, the way we build stuff now. Like we're at a place where we're doing some really cool stuff, and we wouldn't have been able to get to that place if we didn't go through all that hardship of having to like, one, look your family in the eye, look everybody in the eye, and be like, okay, we're gonna do this. We're gonna make like the hardest decisions we possibly could, and find what is that thing that you can have conviction on. Where's that where you can have solid footing to say like, I have at least you know, there's a shot in hell that this can come to fruition. So, you know, it was a blessing, and, you know, things happen for a reason. I'm super grateful for it, but it was, that was a roller coaster.
And it's hard because it's not like COVID's ever happened before where the entire world shut down. So you have nothing to compare sales to. It's like, back in 10 years ago, we had this event that changed the entire market. And everyone's learning on the fly. A lot of businesses went, you know, something similar to where a lot of sales went down, some closed down and stuff, and we couldn't recover. So it's a great story for you guys that you guys were able to man through it, and investors saw it was a good, you know, investment. And
it's a testament to our team, bro. Like we had folks that were like, we never asked anybody. They're on the phones during the weekend. They're, you know, we wouldn't have been able to do it without the team. We had Mario, who went from being an account manager to he's our head of product now.
Oh wow!
Through just like
grinding.
He's brilliant and grit and grind, and just he's got skills that I never had, and Brennan either. Like it's just man, it forged some really badass people that are, I think, you know, wherever Joe goes, I think we have it's like the coaching tree idea. Like people are going to do some cool shit.
Yeah,
you know?
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's ultimately what you want to see is like someone like, you know, thrive off what they learned from your company and be able to, you know, build their own company if they ever get to that point 100%. And have another business partner. Because,
and I'm
like, know their working experience.
Yeah, man, you gonna hire me someday? You know?
Kind of create that mini PayPal mafia.
Yeah,
yourself, right? Oh, for sure. I guess just to kind of wrap it up, is there anything like you want to get out there, like maybe you're working on, or you want to, push out there?
Yeah, I would say, you know, the thing that is big for me is like I have so much belief in the potential for the potential of people aligning on intentions and in the potential to transform systems to be better outcomes for everybody and not about picking sides. When it comes to the VC side of things and investors and folks that are interested in building businesses, you know, there's so much potential in transforming things for the better if there are conversations around what are the things that can create the common good or benefit the good of all, not just the good of
few
your idea or another. So so the project that I'm working on, or what I'm starting to do, is really express what my intentions are, because you can't like light something up in somebody else unless you do express it. So I'm starting to write a little bit more, starting to do podcasts and stuff on just my own point of view in how systems can be changed for the better. How we're doing it at Joe, we've completely pivoted. We're trying to transform the indie coffee industry so that building a small business, whether it be a coffee shop or being an independent roaster, we're trying to build on principles of building from metaphors of what you see in nature versus conventional businesses built out of metaphors of war. It's about zero-sum games and campaigns and dominance. There's so much room to grow when people take one step towards each other and build on common ground instead of building up walls on what keeps them separate. So that's what I'm doing.
Lead by example, right?
Lead by example. Yeah, man.
Nice. I guess just to wrap it all up, that one thing you mentioned in the beginning I thought was pretty powerful, is when you're saying when you're down at your worst or whatever, you feel like a door is there or somebody taps it. Like, what was, I don't know if you want to, do you remember what you were saying earlier?
When you're down, I don't know, what is it? What was it?
So like when you were talking about like when you feel like that the opportunities open up for you when you're down at the maybe at the point
to get into alignment. When it's like, I think when you there's a saying that suffering is sort of the doorway to awakening to what your purpose is. So when you're doing things and it's like you're feeling yourself getting super depressed, when you're feeling like super anxious, that's to me your true self, that being that sits behind the ego that's conditioned by the environment that you grew up in, is being like, yo, this isn't what I came here for. you know? And so when you open up to that and allow yourself to let go of the stories that I think can keep us constrained, like, I'm the type of person that does this. When I hear people say that, I'm always like, man, don't be saying that, because you're limiting yourself to be that. And I think that, we haven't seen each other, and man, have we even seen each other since the pandemic? It's been however many years.
At least for me and you, definitely before the pandemic.
Yeah, it's been right. And I remember hearing somebody say, like, the worst thing you can do for people that you care about is to assume that they're the person that they were when you saw them last, because then you put them in a box of whatever your perception was before. And like, man, we're all here, like, dang, we have one life. We should have the freedom. We should empower each other to do the craziest shit, to be whatever version of themselves they want to be. And so those moments when you're really suffering, I think it's like, use that as an opportunity to create something new.
I think like when it kind of gives a little bit of chills is that you're saying that for you it kind of looked like a second, like you guys were already kind of in alignment. You wanted to do Joe and doing that way, but it feels like there was like maybe a little bit more of realignment, like we said when your dad passed. That was kind of like one that kind of hit. It was kind of felt like that might have been, because you said you guys were probably almost going out, then your dad passed, and then you got the some money to help you go the next way, and then you guys kind of realigned to like what you wanted. That's kind of I gives chills just think that's kind of hit it right there.
Appreciate that, man, because I think it's like, for me now, the way that I relate to things is the only goal that I have now isn't, it's like non-attachment to whatever happens with Joe. If we blow up and we do amazing, then awesome. If not, but it's the path that I have to walk is like what's truly authentic, what's like trying to unfold from within me, and then just checking myself in every moment, because even in the middle of conversations, I'm like, oh, that's me kind of like masking up right there, or playing a role versus just being like, can you get out of that head and trying to manipulate the outcome, or into just expressing what's there. So I think, it takes practice to do that, but for me, that's my only intention and goal now.
No, that's awesome. And then we'll get a link down to your podcast in the descriptions as well. So
I got one episode.
Hey, you start somewhere.
What's the name of your podcast?
I don't even know. Shoot, man, I don't even know what I keep messing with the names. I think it's like I think I landed on common good. That idea of like, how can we transform systems for the greater of the common good, rather than just outcomes. And
I think you got your title.
There we go.
We've got the Common Good podcast down there, the link for that.